Hey guys, it's Kiyra Lynn with the Hollywood Critics Association, and tonight I'm joined by my fellow handsome co-host. We have Mr. Philbrick. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Jami Philbrick, hi. Welcome to the show, and excited at 1 a.m. to talk about Hawkeye.
Is it 1 a.m?
Hello.
Oh man, it is 1 a.m. Wow, just that time just flew by, didn't it, guys?
Yes, and if you can, in case you guys missed it, you have tuned into the Hawkeye After Show, sponsored by the Hollywood Critics Association, with the three of us who are members of the Hollywood Critics Association. We have stayed up so late just to watch the episode and do this show. You guys, it was jam-packed. We have so much that we need to talk about. Right?
Yes.
Let's jump into it because, the introduction of Maya, I loved how much time and detail that they put into this. Mark, let's start with you. What did you feel about that whole first introduction to this character?
Might I say that everything was great, especially because of the proposed, it's not been confirmed, but the proposed appearance of this guy right here, Kingpin, who, if you know from the comics, Echo is the adopted daughter of Mr. Wilson Fisk himself, Kingpin. And so when you see, him call her dad call his uncle saying he will take you home, and you see that big, hands, kind of pinch that cheek, that kind of sounded like Vincent D'Onofrio a little bit. And I know recently he posted a tweet that was kind of saying like he loves the Marvel show, which kind of, made it sound like he's supporting it. But now kind of seeing it, play out like this, maybe it was like kind of like self-promotion, like, hey, I'm not going to outright say I'm in the show, but I'm in the show kind of situation. So that whole, I guess like 5-minute intro was great because you got whole backstory, you got lots of teases. So yeah, it is. Yeah, I'm hyped. I'm hyped to sell at 1 o'clock in the morning.
How about you, Jamie? What did you think?
I loved the opening. I thought it was great. It's similar to what we got of the Kate Bishop opening from the pilot episode last week. And so I loved that and the way it sort of connects this character into the deeper elements of the Marvel universe. But let me address what Mark just said. Listen, I don't believe anything until it's like official and it happens, right? Like I didn't even believe Sam Raimi was directing Doctor Strange 2 until like a month ago. Okay. Because until it's like official, I don't believe anything. So I am not, there's nothing in this episode that has convinced me yet that Vincent D'Onofrio is going to appear. We know that he would love to, he said so. I know what you're talking about the arm and the side. I don't think that was his voice. I could be wrong. It could have been.
But do you think that was him?
It could be. It could also be Armand. It could also maybe be Jack. It could be a character we haven't been introduced yet to who's not the Kingpin. I'm not saying that Vincent D'Onofrio could not end up on this series before the end of the first season. And I'm not saying that Vincent D'Onofrio could not end up in the MCU at some point. But until I see real, concrete, official evidence, I'm not going to engage in the Kingpin as part of this series. Not yet. I can't. Not yet.
That's so funny because I still, as you say that, I still think that Kate's dad is not dead until I have physical evidence that he is buried in the ground.
I don't disagree with that either. I think you're very wise to keep an eye out for Brian D'Arcy to return. You don't cast Brian D'Arcy in one scene. Like you don't. We just saw him the other night in West Side Story. He's Officer Krupke. Like that's a big time actor. You don't cast him in one scene.
He's going to be back. For somebody who doesn't know as I've said before, I never read the comics, but I, of course, was very intrigued to see Maya's prosthetic foot. And obviously she's deaf and has been deaf. She's probably about what, 6 or 7 maybe in the opening scene when she's in the classroom. So
Yeah,
I'm
8.
waiting for,
Give or
if
take.
they're going to give us that backstory as to, how that happens. Don't tell me. I don't want to know if you guys know, but I'd love to see, how they actually, if they actually, let us in on that. Let's talk about what was the next part that we were talking about? Oh, let's talk about that 10-minute fantastic fight scene.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like, I went back and I actually was like, how long is this scene? It was like 13 to 23 minutes, the timing wise. I was like, oh wow, they did a whole 10 minutes montage on that. Jami, what were your favorite parts of this fantastic fight scene?
Ooh, that's a great one. Well, first of all, I was really looking forward to it. So Disney Plus had actually released most of that scene on Disney Plus Day. And so I actually thought that it might be the end of the second episode. So I was I've been waiting for it, right? Like I was really hoping it would be at the beginning of this third episode, as it was. I really enjoyed it. It's great because, well, first of all, I don't know if you guys noticed this, it's all one continuous shot. Right. So there's sort of and certainly at the beginning, it's kind of like a steady cam, all one continuous shot thing. And then I loved, it really gave a chance for my dog's walking by my green screen there, folks. So I'm not even going to pretend it's not happening. But that's what happens when you're doing a show at 1 a.m.
Bring
So,
all the dogs. We want
yeah,
all
bring
the
it all dogs. Yeah, he's not like Lucky, but he's a good old English sheepdog. Oh, he's here. But anyways, I loved that it gave a moment for and we saw this actually in the diner scene that followed, is a real moment where Clint and, bonding moments, right, for Clint and for Kate, and to kind of get to know each other and understand this moment, everything that's sort of going on. And then I love the trick arrows, getting to see all the different trick arrows. And there's a lot of funny quotes. Like, I think at one point Kate's like, if that's not if that's not one of the 4 most dangerous arrows, then I don't want to see the most dangerous arrow. Like, that was all great. And the bro stuff with the tracksuit mafia and what was their moving truck had a weird thing on it. Like, I loved the music. Yeah. The bros. Yeah. I love the music. And, it just has a great sort of, I've heard a lot of people kind of say like, this is going to be, like Hawkeye and Die Hard. And it's almost more like Hawkeye in the first Lethal Weapon. He's Danny Glover. I'm too old for this S, right? She's sort of the Mel Gibson, the Martin Riggs, the crazy, younger person. So, and of course, people forget the first Lethal Weapon was a Christmas movie. So I think that there's a good feel to that. So it was, I really think this is like the signature, certainly the signature sequence of the first 3 episodes.
What I loved about it was when Maya comes into the room and she notices that Clint has that hearing aid, and she starts to sign to him, and then all of this whole thing about Ronan starts to come out. And you and I were talking about this off camera, Jami, about how he tells her that Black Widow killed Ronan. And I thought that flashing back to that scene in the movie, in a way, she actually did kill him. She actually did kill him. What do you think about that particular scene, Mark? What were your thoughts?
Well, the entire chase sequence I love because it is, and I even busted out, went to deep in my comic book, but this was straight up Hawkeye number 3, where the entire chase sequence is the tracksuit mafia. Well, in the issue, the tracksuit mafia kidnaps this girl, and Hawkeye and Kate take their Challenger to chase after tracksuit mafia. So I love that little, Easter egg where Kate is like, "Oh, let's take this one," and then Hawkeye is like, "Are you kidding me? I'm not taking that Challenger," because in the issue he buys the Challenger from the woman that gets kidnapped, and throughout the issue that car that he just completely loves gets trashed. And so here he is, like going to the airport, taking her, one night stand to the airport because she needs to escape from the Tracksuit Mafia, and the car is trashed. So I love that little Easter egg. I also love the little kind of, I mean, I don't want to say it's like straight up from the Raid 2, but that little one shot chase sequence kind of does remind me of the Raid 2, where that behind the scenes look, I don't know if you guys have seen it, where you see the cameraman like take a camera and pass it off to another guy, and they pass it off to another guy, so that everything is like one continuous sequence within the car itself. So the way that they move the camera around, trying to showcase like what's around them, that reminded me so much of the Raid 2. And even in the preview during Disney Plus Day, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, man, this is like, they must have taken this inspiration from the Raid 2, because that was, straight up from that. And so I kind of really enjoyed, that whole chase sequence alone. And even, the scene before that where Maya and Hawkeye are fighting against each other, and then Kazi and Cade are fighting against each other. Like, that's some real, like, well choreographed fight choreography there. So everything about that sequence is 2 thumbs up, man. It was great.
And I loved that. I just want to say that fight sequence before the car chase inside, it was a KB toy store. Like, I loved that it was an old abandoned KB toy store, like, warehouse. And so that was fun.
It was a toy store, but I was like, I didn't catch that. It was a KB. That's hilarious.
It was KB.
Yeah.
It was specifically KB. Yeah, that was no mistake. Yep.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
It's kind of heartbreaking.
From that was when Cliff was able to obtain his arrows, goes over the side of the thing and like does that side shot and releases and basically frees Kate. I was like, if we could, I mean, it was just so classic Clint. But then can we talk about, I want to know whether or not Mark knows how many of the trick arrows were used in that sequence. Jamie and I off camera were trying to like count them all, but maybe with you we could like figure it out, pull it out.
Which also was in the comic book, by the way.
Oh, good.
Right.
That particular issue, that whole trick arrows sequence was also in the comic book as well. So there was the Play-Doh,
the putty,
there was the acid, there was the exploding one.
Yes.
There was the plunger, there was the USB, which is from Avengers 1.
The string one.
Man, the pimp particle one.
The Pim arrow, yes.
Oh yes.
Yes, which was amazing, by the way.
Did you talk about the Christmas tree arrows? The
Christmas tree arrow, and then the grappling hook. So that's what, 8, 9? 8.
No, the grappling hook. I thought it was the same thing as the plunger, but no, that's different. Yeah.
Right.
And then one regular arrow.
Yeah, one regular arrow. I liked when she was actually shooting that regular arrow, and even though he couldn't hear what she was saying, he was totally coaching her, which is essentially what we saw in the first 2 episodes. What Kate wanted from Clint, to be trained, to be taught by the best. And so I loved how they had that little bit of a moment right there on the bridge, standing on the cars, and him not even being able to hear her, and yet they're so simpatico. Especially, I think, even when they've already escaped and they're already in the subway, and he still can't hear her, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, we didn't walk the dog," and and then he turns to her and says, "You are one of the best in the world," and then he begins to talk about, "Oh, but we forgot to walk the dog." I thought that was I loved how he didn't know how in sync they were, but Kate starting to pick it up. So let's talk about that scene in the diner. Jamie, you were talking about the bonding moments. What were some of the key points that you particularly liked during that scene?
Well, I just liked that, we're getting to know Kate as Clint's getting to know Kate, and we're getting to know Clint in a different way than we've seen him previously. And I also liked, this is a different scene, but there's another scene where his son calls and he doesn't have his hearing aid fixed yet. And so he can't hear his son's voice. And so she sort of interprets it for him, writing it down. And I thought that was just a really sweet scene. And I thought that Hailee Steinfeld acted that really well, because you could see sort of Kate having a realization and feeling for this man and seeing what he's been really trying to explain to her, that the only thing he cares about is his family at this point and getting home to them for Christmas. So I thought that was really sweet, but I liked that the series, and especially this episode that really kind of, coming off of the last episode, just shot, completely, just went for it from the beginning and had this huge chase scene and fight sequence and everything. And then to be able to have these moments within this episode and within the series where it can kind of slow down for a second and you can see these characters, you can see them really, getting to know each other, and the stuff with Walking Lucky. And, and just, I think in a way, Clint being more relaxed around her. And I did love when he said, you're not lying when you tell people you're the greatest archer in the world. So it's nice that the series is allowing these two characters to really have some development, come together. And obviously it's going to be because that relationship, their friendship, I would imagine the next 3 episodes is going to be challenged in some way. And they're going to have huge obstacles to overcome, as we do in any Marvel project. And so I think it's great that in episode 3, they were able to develop a lot of that, so it pays off later.
What about you, Mark? What were your thoughts around that diner scene, if you have any?
I think going back to what Jami was talking about, where his son Nathaniel called. I think at that point, that's when Kate knew that she messed up big time, and that's when she realized, like, oh, I'm not just hanging out with my idol. I'm not hanging out with the person I looked up to. He's actually a human being, with real life problems, and I'm just because of my actions, I completely took him away from the one thing that gives him joy in this world, and that's being with his family. And I think that kind of poignant moment where she realizes that, at that point, she was really trying to help him out and trying to get back to his family, like, in the best way possible, and try to mend things together by doing that. And of course, the diner scene, as a fan, I love when Kate actually shows the real true life costume design of Hawkeye, which,
oh yeah,
I know you showed off your statue last week, but I just
what do you got?
Mine too, which is the actual costume that Kate drew in the scene. And I'm like, man, I really hope that they do a similar thing where they did in WandaVision, where they showcase Wanda's actual Scarlet Witch costume. It may obviously need to be updated a little bit because, the whole hawk wings, for the eyes, kind of cheesy, but,
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I'm all here for it if they do it. Yeah,
he's got one of the coolest costumes in comics. Like, I love that purple and the big eyes and the hawk. But it is funny the way they sort of, they pointed out the ridiculousness of it. And I'm wondering, like, yeah, I agree with you, Mark. Like, it makes me feel like, what they've done with a lot of these shows and these characters in the past few years, after they've been established in sort of the real MCU, then getting a chance to, kind of go into the actual costumes. We saw that, as you mentioned, with WandaVision. I guess what I'm wondering, and I'd love to hear what either of you think about this, like, do you think that's hinting at seeing the costume before the series is over, or is that the Easter egg? is the drawing. That's as much as we're going to get. That's the Easter egg. That's the thing that we can talk about, that we're not actually going to see Clint wear it.
I have a feeling that if they bring this whole thing back to the branding moment, maybe if this whole thing gets rectified, and Clint decide, like, maybe he'll show up to a public sort of event wearing this costume. But what I would have been noticing, especially with all of the arrows and whatnot, they've been splashing purple left and right throughout this episode. So I love how they're at least tying this back to his original costume, his original colors. Whether or not Clint would actually wear it on an everyday basis, I don't think the Clint Barton that we see, that we know and love from this universe would. But I think as maybe, like I said, as maybe a dare or something to make somebody happy, he would. What do you think, Mark?
I don't know if you guys saw the LARPing featurette that Marvel put out, but the opening shot that they did, they had someone in that costume. So I'm thinking there's two ways that this could go.
Yep.
One is, Clint goes back, takes his family to a LARPing event in New York City, and the guy hands him the costume and he wears it as a LARPing, a LARPing thing, or it's some sort of like fashion thing where, as a present, Kate hands Clint that costume to wear as his branding moment, and not to feel bad about saying no, Clint would be like, okay, I'll wear it. And then, he wears it, and then Kate is like, no, that doesn't work. Okay, all right, let me change it. And then we see a possibly new costume for him. So I can see it going many ways, but which direction should it go? I think the LARPing one would be, funnier. So I'm probably gonna try and,
I like both of those ideas. I could see either one, and I didn't know about that. Now that I know that the costume is canon in the series, right? That someone at the LARPing event was wearing it. How that explains how she would then draw it since she wasn't at the event, I don't know, but that's for another time. Since we know that now, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some circumstance that forces him to wear it, to protect his identity, even though everyone seems to know Clint Barton is Hawkeye in this world. Or some reason like that. I could see him reluctantly having to don that costume at some point.
You know what, Mark, if this pans out, man, you'll be the man of predictions for this episode. I still want to talk a little bit more about that conversation, because I know we have one other scene to get to, but I love how, Kate is declaring, even though we already know this, she's declaring to Clint, in the diner, that, this is the moment that she's been waiting for. This is the moment of her life that she wants to be helping people. And, that her putting on the Ronan costume was the moment that she knew that she was going to be the person that she's supposed to be. And, Clint is trying to talk her down, that the life comes with a price. And it's so cute to see her, wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, and still not understanding the sacrifices that he has to give up. So I don't know where Kate goes in the comics and what her storyline goes into. But I'd be very interested to see, as she goes further down this line, what she does end up having to sacrifice. Is it as great as Clint has had to, leave his family and kind of sacrifice that time with the people that he loves? What is it that she ultimately sacrifices for this life? I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, yeah, and I think that's what Clint tells her, right? Like, I think it's basically like, sure, we wear cool costumes and it's a lot of fun, but it's also a lot of sacrifice and a lot of things I've had to give up and a lot of things I've had to lose friends, hearing. I mean, there's, the list goes on and on with Clint. He's not a god. He's not a monster, right? He's a guy with a bow and arrow. So I think that that's absolutely what he's telling her in that sequence. And I think it's going to be interesting to see as the series goes on and as Kate Bishop goes on in MCU projects, what are some of those sacrifices and tragedies that surround her going to be? And how will that shape her as a person and as a hero?
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Mark? What do you think?
And I think this is going back to the very first episode where, Kate's mom is like, you've always been, rich people always think that they're invincible, and young kids always think that they're invincible, and you're both. But let me tell you that you're not invincible. Clint's trying to tell her the same thing, but it's kind of falling a little bit on deaf ears. And I think this kind of goes back to the whole, situation where she's just trying to look for some sort of like father figure, because she never really had that, throughout most of her life, because she was 7 or 8 when her father may or may not have died in the 2012 attack on New York. And throughout her life, it was just her and her mother. And I think there's like that whole, trust issue where, she thinks Jack is an enemy, which, we all think he is. And then Clint, who is not her father, she looks up to him as kind of a father figure. But even though, there isn't that kind of like a relationship yet where he thinks of her as her daughter. So I think that kind of, once that trust builds up even more, I think she's going to start to realize like, okay, Clint and my mom were actually right about this, where, I'm not invincible, and, everything that I've worked for, every dream that I had actually kind of sort of sucks. So being a hero kind of sucks sometimes. And that's what she has to learn if she's going to be, successful. And, we'll find out if she does as the show goes on.
You mentioned Jack, and Jamie and I were talking a little bit off camera, after that amazing action sequence, and then, the time in the subway and him getting his hearing aid fixed. And then we get to a part where she finally mentions Jack towards the end of the episode. I was telling Jamie, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot. He's the bad guy. Jamie was like, of course they're going to slide that in there to remind you. And it was like, oh yeah. And then, I loved seeing the apartment back in its grandiose form. I mean, did I catch that wrong? That is the same. That is.
Oh,
the same
yeah.
Blown up.
Yeah, absolutely. Same building from the Avengers intro.
Right.
Yeah.
And I love how she discloses, it was her great grandfather. It was either her great grandfather or great great grandfather built the building. And for whatever reason, I felt like that's sort of a nugget. I don't know why. Like, but then can we talk about, Clint wandering around and how this episode ends? What did you think about that, Mark?
Clint sees that, Jack has his sword. So, that kind of plays more into what's probably going to happen in the next episode. I mean, not probably. I mean, it's definitely going to play into the next episode. But I just want to see, what storyline they're going to put together between Clint and Jack, because they have history together. And, Jack is most I mean, in here they probably don't.
Right.
That's what I want to see.
Right.
Because Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, but Swordsman and Clint, they came from the same circus.
Yeah, something like that. Their origin stories are similar. Now I don't believe that they've ever talked about the circus thing with
Yeah,
Clint in the MCU.
No.
So my guess is that is not what they would do. But I could see one of two things happening in regards to that history between them. Either we're seeing the history between Hawkeye and Jack for the first time on this series in the MCU, or there's some other history that has not been revealed yet that perhaps there will be, that maybe somehow Jack's connected, to Bucharest or to what, who knows, all the different things that we know have come from Clint's background in the MCU. He could be connected to S.H.I.E.L.D. I mean, we really don't know. So my guess is that this is setting the table for the Jack, for the swordsman Hawkeye thing. But, if they are passing the baton to Kate, then obviously, Kate and Jack will carry that on a little bit. But I wouldn't be surprised if they're trying to fake us out with Jack's the bad guy. It seems too simple that Jack's the bad guy at this point. And I bet that we're not going to see a fight escalate from this final moment in episode 3 at the beginning of episode 4. I'm guessing it's going to be more of a talkie scene and you're doing that, but I thought it was because you were, and they kind of all get on the same page, and maybe Jack will be an ally to them in the next episode. I wouldn't trust Vera Farmiga as far as I can throw it.
It's so funny because I was going to ask you guys, because of that last scene where Jack brings the sword up to Clint. I was going to say, obviously Jack is supposed to be this the swordsman, this amazing fenceman, but that is also a sword that Clint has killed many people with. And my question was like, okay, if there is a fight scene, who do you think Clint is going to be able to take that sword out of Jack's hand so easily because he's so familiar with it? Is he that? I mean, what is the different levels here that we have with Clint and Jack? You know what I mean? But I do agree with you, Jamie, that is a good spin, but I have gotten like bad Vera Farmiga vibes. I have gotten bad Eleanor vibes from the get-go. So I definitely will piggyback on with you with that, because I don't.
And she runs a security firm that has information that one of the tracksuit mafia works for them. Come on, it's all too shady.
But then is it too easy? I mean, would they do us dirty like that? I don't know.
I mean,
well,
they did mention, Maya does mention that she has a boss, right? That the tracksuit mafia are answering to someone. I know Mark thinks it's the Kingpin, but what if it's Vera Farmiga's character instead?
That is good.
It's mom.
That is good. There was a whole thing about that with, what was the character's name again? The Maya sidekick?
Yeah. It was
Kazi?
like a K name. Yeah.
Kazi.
That guy.
Kazi.
That guy.
Yeah.
Well, you guys, I can't believe that we're already at the end of the show. It's like 1:35 in the morning for all of you guys. I mean, we're dead serious that we did this at 1:30.
Yeah. Woohoo!
We will be here again next Wednesday and every Wednesday until the season finale, recording at this time, because we not only love this show, but we love hanging out together at this early morning time. Make sure you guys to click on that notification bell to, well, actually, first, we want you to subscribe, and then make sure that you click on that notification bell so you can get all of the amazing Hollywood Critics Association content. You can also catch me on, my handle is at Kiyra Lynn, and you can catch me on Instagram and YouTube and all those fun things. Jamie, where can everybody else find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Philbrick, and my name on Facebook. And you can check out my movie reviews at moviephone.com.
Yeah, Mr. Movie Phone. I love that. How about you, Mark? Where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram at right there, Pacman NR7. And you can find all my movie reviews at nerdreactor.com.
Yes, you guys. It's been lovely spending this morning with you. We'll see you guys all next week, and bye for now.
Bye.
See ya.